Good morning, everybody, and happy Aloha Friday. Welcome to PSG of Mercer County. And PSG of Mercer County is a group that is here for you, anybody that is in any kind of career transition. It could be that there have been organizational changes that have impacted you. That's happened twice in my career. Or it could also be that you're returning to work after a scheduled or planned absence, taking care of family or other obligations that you have personally. Or you're deciding to make your own change in your own career. Our goal is to provide you with the resources that you need to help you be more efficient and more effective in your own job search. And we do like to celebrate at PSG of Mercer County. Of course, I wear my Hawaiian shirt for Aloha Friday. And I learned that today is National Eat Your Beans Day. And so I thought that's just perfect. It really should have been maybe tomorrow, because July 4th, typically we have barbecues and we're outside. And so Franks and beans are something that's served. So if you are someone that's into beans and wanting to have that, today is your day to celebrate eating your beans. And I guess it's all kinds of beans as well, not just baked beans. We have lots of resources for anyone who's in a job search, and it's one is through our website. Our website is psgofmercercounty.org, psgofmercercounty.org, so please check out our website. It does have over 120 pages of content, so it is a pretty big website, lots of information. We do have job boards pages, so now what becomes important is finding those opportunities, certainly as the pandemic, not that it's waning, but the economy is opening a little bit. Companies are a little bit more willing to hire. Also, companies are finally figuring out how to hire in a pandemic, how to hire virtually. So excuse me, somebody does have their microphone or speakers on. Your microphone, please mute yourself. I do hear a little bit of, this is the caller. Sorry about that. Sometimes when people call in just using the phone, it's a little harder to do mute. So it is important to have a list of companies to find in your job search. Companies are finding that it's how to hire now better in a COVID environment, in a pandemic environment, using virtual interviews more. We'll talk a little about that later. So if you do want to look for a company list, at least companies in kind of our geographic area, you will want to look at our career pages and our job boards pages. So look at our job boards pages. There are over 2,600 companies listed there in Mercer County and the 6 border counties. So kind of our geographic area, but that's a big area when you think of overseas in Bucks County, of course, Burlington County, Middlesex County, all surround us. So you could make a targeted company list, and then when you find the company on our page and you click on their link, then what happens is you go right to their career pages. So hopefully they will be keeping their career pages as current as possible. So go take a look at our job search pages. You'll be pleasantly surprised at the amount of companies that are there, over 2,600. And we've already pre-categorized them as well. We do also have our LinkedIn group. Our LinkedIn group is also called PSG of Mercer County. We have over 1,570 members. These are all people that have been through our program, so they've been to at least one meeting already. We do validate anyone that makes a request to join our group. We do validate that they are in either our emailing list, or I'll also go through the caller logs that I get from these video calls, these video meetings, to make sure that these are people that have been to one of our meetings in person or virtually at least once. We're just trying to keep the name collectors, the list collectors out, people that are kind of just searching for names to send advertisements to, just trying to minimize that. But in the group, once you're a member, what you could do is you can share articles. If you have job leads, you might have gotten one of those emails for a terrific job that just doesn't apply to you. We all get those. You think it's pretty interesting, you might want to post that in the LinkedIn group as well. Your activity on LinkedIn does help your profile to be seen more readily. LinkedIn does have an algorithm when someone puts in a search term, like Project Manager New Jersey. It has to decide which ones come to the top and then which go beyond it. And so there is an algorithm. And what we understand is that your activity on LinkedIn is relevant for that as well. Okay. If there's anybody that has landed, if you want, you can put and you're visiting us for your last meeting before you're starting your job, you could put that in chat if you'd like. If you've had any recent interviews, you want to tell someone, you can do that as well. We're also going to use chat for questions and answers. Now, chat is in the upper right is a button that has, looks like a little cartoon bubble, the kind when a comic book character would be talking with the words in that little bubble. Typically, I watch and monitor that while our presenter is presenting, and I'm wearing both hats. I'm the presenter today. It'll just be a little harder for me. So what I'll ask you to do, if you don't mind, please put the word question and then write your question, because we will take a break 2 times during the program, once in the middle and once in the end. We're going to use chat for questions and answers, and this way it'll be a little bit easier for me to spot those. If I was just monitoring that and I had a presenter doing the presentation, it'd be a little easier without that. So I'd just say, put the word question and ask your question for any of the slides. And again, we do have a built-in stopping point. Okay, so also remember, keep yourself on mute. And again, because I'm wearing all the hats, if I do hear someone muting, I may have a moment or two to pause just to make sure I can go find that microphone that's on, and I'll make sure I'll turn it off. I will do my best to stay on top of that as well. And so what I'm going to do right now is share my screen so that we can start the presentation. And this, of course, is normally the time that I would be introducing the presenter, and I just kind of get the sense that if I introduced myself with a formal introduction, that'd just be a little self-serving. So hello folks, it's me. So let's get ourselves into the program. So this is interview preparation and tips. It's now a fairly updated program because we are including video interviewing in this as well. But really what becomes important is a saying that I learned a long time ago, probably right out of college: proper planning prevents poor performance. And that's really what this process is about, and any process in job search. But certainly when you're preparing for your interviews, you want to make sure that you're very well prepared. There we go. So first, realize there are different types of interviews that you may encounter. There are video interviews. They seem to be more and more prevalent. You do want to dress like it is an in-person interview, at the very least from what's in the view of the camera. You also have to practice looking at the camera and not the screen. And I don't know how many of you can see my face right now, but I'm making an effort, making sure to look at the camera, which is a little above my slides. And so the reason why you want to look at the camera is your audience. The screen is not really your audience, because your audience is how they see you. You want to have a neutral background. I did a so-so job with that, but fortunately I'm not on an interview. But you certainly don't want to have a very messy background. It's just too distracting. And you want to have good lighting typically in front of you. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail a little later. There are certainly phone interviews. Those have been around for a while. If possible, use a landline. That's basically not your cell phone. If you have a landline, that's what would work well. If you have a corded phone, there are not many of those around or used any longer. That's going to be better than a wireless phone or a cordless phone. It is okay to walk around. Some people find that when you're in the moment of having that conversation, that if you walk around, it's calming and relaxing. That's fine. If you do that, don't wear loud shoes. So if you're walking on floors, you're going to want to make sure, wear slippers or wear socks, nothing that has a clump, clump, clump noise that'll come across in the background. And what's nice, because you're on the phone, no one will see you. You'll sit at your desk or table. Have a pen and pad handy. You can have some notes that are in front of you, which is a lot easier than if you were actually in an in-person interview. Or at the very least, you can take notes and you can respond later or follow up later, or maybe reference some of your notes in your thank you letter later on. So you can have that around very easy when you're on a phone interview. There'll certainly be one-on-one in-person interviews, and that's where typically you are meeting with, well, one person at a time. It's not uncommon as you go through the process, even if there's a video or phone interview early on, that you will have an in-person interview. It may turn into multiple interviews. It could be that individually you'll meet with 2 or 3 people, or maybe you'll be invited back. So that's one-on-one style interview. And there could be a group where there's usually several people that you're speaking with together. Usually one is the leader, but usually others will ask questions as well. So it's certainly okay to look at the person asking the question, because they're the one who has that interest right now. You can go back and forth a little bit, but give a lot of your time to the person asking the question. Of course, if you were in a video interview, look at the camera, because it's a little harder to discern who you're looking at. Also, always remember, smile, sit up straight. I'm doing my best to do that now. Don't fidget, don't look nervous. It doesn't always reflect well. You never know how other people will perceive some of the fidgets or a little bit of emotions that may be going on. I realize it's not uncommon for us to be nervous at all during an interview, but just try and be sensitive to that, because sometimes that doesn't come across very friendly. Do your research. There's a lot you could learn, you should learn ahead of starting your interview. You want to research on the company website, or go to a library, because libraries have a lot of resources about organizations, especially publicly traded companies. Excuse me. So you want to get as much information about the company as you can. You never know what may come up in a conversation, or you may also want to talk about something that you find in the research, and that will show very positively to the interviewer that you're someone that's really interested in the organization. Review the company's website. The basic reason why is the company is telling you exactly what they want you to know. So you should know what they want you to know. And again, you never know what may come up in an interview, especially if there's a press release or other information that's fairly current. You may want to be able to talk about it. Speak to interviewers or research interviewers on LinkedIn. You may find that the person or people that you are going to meet, you'll usually get their names before the interview. Learn a little about them, see if there's anything in common, see if there's something specific of interest. You'll be very readily available to be able to talk about something in their background. There may be something that you could bond with them because you've done a little bit of research. For instance, a university, you may have gone to the same university with them, grew up in the same town, if there was that kind of information. So you never know what you'll find. Do some research. LinkedIn provides a lot of information. Also, contact people in your professional network. You never know who you know that may know other things about that organization. I know every once in a while someone will contact me about the former companies I worked with, and if I can, I give them that information. I've been out of corporate world for a little while, but I'm still actually able to help some people with some of the background in the company, at least my recollection of it at that time. So contact your network, even if it's someone that worked someplace more than a few years ago, get a little bit of background information. And you never know what else you'll find on social media, on the internet. There could be news stories that you'll find, anything that is of interest, late breaking news that maybe they just didn't get to put on their website. It's just more information. Keep it in the back of your head. Of course, if you're going to have a video interview or a phone interview, you can make some notes, keep it right in front of you. Actually, folks, you can't see, but I actually have a piece of paper right here in front of my screen, or below my screen out of your view, something that I can reference as part of this discussion. So you never know. Just keep that stuff handy and do the research. Keep it in the back of your mind when you're in person. Let's talk about some of the things that are important for communicating. That is my favorite cell phone I ever had. I had the flip phone, the Motorola flip phone, and boy, did I love it. I get a lot more use out of my smartphone I have now, but I just enjoyed the flip phone. Do make sure you confirm your appointment, especially if you made the appointment a week or more ago. If you last spoke with the recruiter or the HR or the hiring manager a day ago, not as much important, but if it was a week or more ago, it might just be send an email confirming that I'll be at your office tomorrow at 2 o'clock, whatever it is. It just, it's good practice. It also if they get that email or they get that confirmation phone call, if for some reason they forgot to tell you that they have a conflict, that will remind them as well. No one likes to drive or make the effort to get to that appointment only to find out when you're there that the interviewer needed to cancel. Be nice if you can find that sooner rather than later. Do make sure you get all of the contact names that you're going to meet and their phone numbers, if possible, ahead of time. Certainly the first person that you're going to meet, because if for some reason maybe you're running a little late or stuck in traffic, you now have a means to easily contact that person just before the interview time starts and let them know that you're going to be delayed. It's going to be unfortunate. Don't be embarrassed by it. It's much better to be proactive than just to show up a half hour late because that's the way things went. That looks bad. Also, make sure you provide your contact information to the people that you're communicating with. Whether they keep it or not, that's up to them, but it gives them an opportunity if they need to either call you, especially if you're on your way, or email you, hopefully the night or morning before, if there's some need for them to reschedule. Just good practice to do that. Also, let your references know that you are interviewing. And you probably all have a couple of professional references. I always did. And I would always send an email the day before letting them know I have an interview with the ABC company. And the reason why is I've always let my references know that they may be contacted by somebody specific. I've been a reference for some of my former coworkers as well, and business friends. And I always tell them, you need to tell me to be a reference to someone. If someone calls me blindly, I'm not going to talk as a reference. I'm going to wait till I get your approval. So I always let references know. Good thing to do. This is fun. Let's talk about video interview etiquette. Now, we can certainly spend a whole hour on video interview. I know Alex Freund does a very in-depth presentation on it. A few other people do as well. This is just a couple of slides, just so you make sure you're aware of some of the things that are important. But video interview is really important because it's really your image that you're projecting. It's how people are going to see you, the impression. So it's not just being considerate, but it's really about how you are being seen by the people on the other side of the camera. So it really becomes very important. Certainly be on time, and that may mean you have to check your technology ahead of time. So if they send you a link and it's of a video connection service you've never used before, you might try and see if you can load the app, or maybe ask even ahead of time, can we have a 5-minute practice session to make sure it works? They'll really appreciate that, because if you're fighting with the technology, if you have a 10 o'clock interview and you turn it on at 10 and you're fighting for 5 or 10 minutes to get the technology to work, you're late. It's a little embarrassing. Don't use a mobile phone, don't use a tablet. Typically, those are devices that we hold. They wiggle around sometimes. I'm on a couple of business meetings every week where people are out taking a walk with their cell phone and I see a shaky image. It's very annoying. Also for you, the screen tends to be smaller. It's a little harder to see the people. You may also start moving yourself around as you're moving with the screen. Don't use it. If you can, use a laptop or a desktop, or if you're going to use a tablet, put it up at eye level on a stand and don't let it move. Certainly wear work-appropriate clothing. This is Ron Burgundy from those Anchorman films. So he certainly is dressed appropriately, and he's wearing a suit and tie, so that becomes important. So you're having a real interview. It should be treated just like you're in person. And certainly because it's a video interview, anything off camera typically can be casual, and that's going to be okay. Yes, I've heard cases where people have said, will you stand up, or are you wearing pants? You can choose to address that and say, I'm casual off camera because it's just more comfortable, or of course, wear the full suit, not a problem. But certainly what people see, you want them to see your professional appearance. And pay attention. Don't do other things, especially in a video interview. I know like I said, I'm on some business networking calls. It's not really to earn business. It's not with a client. It's business networking groups. And every once in a while, as someone is speaking, you can see someone is answering a phone or doing something else. But in an interview, don't do that. Turn your phone off or put it in another room. Do what you need to pay attention to the interviewer. And of course, look at the camera. Your camera is your audience. This woman is looking at the screen. The camera is probably a little bit above her. And so we're looking at the top of her head. She's not making eye contact with us on that screen. So always make sure you do your best to look at the camera. Now, there's nothing wrong with, as the screen changes, you look down, eye what's going on, and then raise your head back up. Perfectly fine, but address the audience. Lighting is very important. Don't light from behind. Unfortunately, what happens when you light from behind or from one side, you look a little bit like a silhouette, or it can wash out your image. It's not a pleasant experience for the people that are watching you. So instead, what you want to do is make sure that the light comes to you from a little bit above and certainly in front of you, so it minimizes shadows and that you could be seen full face. If you have a window behind you, ideally don't, but if you do, draw a curtain or do something to cover it up. And you can see behind me, I've got a curtain. There's a window behind there as well. So I want to make sure that I kept that light from washing out or creating a silhouette in my video conferences. Also, positioning the camera is very important. Remember Where's Waldo? So what this guy probably did was he might have a laptop or a tablet that he positioned in such a way that he's looking perfectly at the screen. But unfortunately, the camera is aimed a little too high. So we're seeing him from the nose up. So he's probably having a much better experience than the people that are watching him. This young lady, same thing. She's probably got a laptop. She's got it tilted in just the right position for her to see, but we're only seeing about the lower 2/3 of her face. This is poor camera position does cause a bit of a distraction. Good camera position does make for a very pleasant experience. So it does become very important that you position the camera, you frame the camera for you properly, worry less about how well you do or don't see. Separately from framing the camera location is also very important when you're using video interviewing. Don't place the camera above you or to one side. So in this case, this guy probably has two screens side by side, and he probably is watching the right screen, but the camera is on the left screen. So we're looking at the left side of his face. He's looking at the screen. He probably sees his audience, but his audience sees the left side of his screen. I've actually seen this once in an interview. A few years ago, I was interviewed by somebody for a position, and she was just turned to one side, and that was my whole experience. So not always very pleasant. Don't place the camera below you. So this lady clearly has a very nice ceiling. I guess her nostrils are clear, so that's important. But it also does not make for a very pleasant experience. So you don't want to place the camera below you as well. You really want to think of it Goldilocks and the Three Bears, placing it just right. Placing at eye level is really just right because that's how we normally interact with people, and the camera should be the same way. So you want to make sure camera location is at your eye level. If you need to raise your camera, you can put it on a stand or some big books or something to raise it up, or you can raise or lower your chair if you have one of those office chairs that allow for that as well, so that you're positioned properly for the camera. And your work location is very important, where you're conducting the interview. So you certainly want to be in a quiet place. This guy's got a couple of kids coming into the meeting. And this is actually a video, a BBC video. And so he was interrupted during an interview on the BBC. So do be very careful. A busy or distracting background can be very unprofessional. So this guy probably has his home office right in his bedroom. A lot of people do that, but he didn't make his bed. There's clothing thrown all over the place. It's really a very messy situation. Looks very distracting. And certainly if you are interviewing someone like this, you may wonder, well, if he's got a messy room, what is his work life like? You just never know what the perception of those people is going to be. A simple background is best. I know there's some people that do keep kind of white blue screens or curtains that they put behind them. I put a half a curtain behind me just to minimize some of the distraction in the background. And if you can do that, or have a plain wall or a simple background, always works best. So that was video interview. And let's think about your attitude and your appearance on the interview day. And this will toggle between, video interviews as well as in-person interviews, but a lot of these pertain to both. You certainly want to keep your routine as normal as possible. If you normally get up at 7 in the morning, get up at 7 in the morning. If you eat breakfast in the morning, eat breakfast in the morning. So you certainly want to keep your routine as normal as possible. So if you have an exercise routine, yeah, do that. It's a normal day. Just one of the things that you have during the day is you're going to have an interview or a conversation with somebody. Just want to make it a normal day because it'll be easier for you, more natural for you to get through the interview discussion. Lay out your suit, iron your clothing. So if you have an early morning interview, you might do this the evening before, the day before. If you got an afternoon appointment, you could certainly do it in the morning. You certainly don't want to look wrinkled. It'll be more apparent certainly in person as compared to in video, but some video cameras are pretty good, so they may catch some of those wrinkles. You want to make sure you don't have too many of that. Hygiene and grooming. My answer to that is yes, do both. Certainly, if you're going to be in person with someone, do wash. Make sure there's no odors from the day before or whatever. Don't bring your outside life into the interview. Do groom, and whether it's shaving or combing your hair or whatever's your professional look. Do be attentive to that. And if there are other things you do like manicures and whatnot that you normally would do, yeah, take care of that. Why not? Also, choose your accessories wisely. You certainly, don't want to dress up like Mr. T with, the 1,000 chains around your neck. I realize for some people that is a way they like to dress, but also what happens, do remember, in a professional environment, sometimes your personal presentation should be a little different than your professional presentation. Not trying to change who you are, but do be aware that other people, when they see us, do form an opinion. A watch, a few rings, bracelets, necklaces, they're all fine. Just choose them wisely. Don't have too much typically. Of course, if you know that the person you're interviewing with, you've done this research, is someone who does wear a lot of jewelry or dresses differently, you may want to be more in line with that person. So choose accessories wisely. Shine your shoes, especially if you are in person. There are just a lot of people that put a lot of value into shined versus scuffed shoes. So if you can, the evening before, shine your shoes. Of course, if you're going into a city interview, you may find a shoe shine store. You may want to get that done. So there are people that put a lot of value on the way your appearance and even your shoes look. Really don't wear perfume or cologne, again, in an in-person interview for a couple of reasons. Some people, when they put on perfume or cologne, put on a little too much, and so it could be a distraction. And for others, there are people that are allergic to different perfumes and cologne. And that's a surefire way to not only end the interview, but probably you won't be called back. So do be very cautious about using perfume or cologne when you're in an in-person interview. Yep. Also, bring a face mask with you, especially during COVID-19, because we are talking about social distancing. We may have the opportunity to sit 6 feet or more away from each other, but it will be a very positive perspective of you are showing how you care not just about the process, but the people that you're meeting, and bring the face mask with you. If they say that they're comfortable with you taking it off or whatever, that's fine. Or maybe once you sit in the interview room, that's when you remove it because you've now established you're 6 feet or more apart. But during the pandemic, bring the face mask with you. Other things that you want to bring with you, certainly extra copies of your resume. That's, of course, important when you're having an in-person interview. Actually, the last company that hired me, it was in 2013, I did just that. I brought 2 or 3 extra copies of my resume with me. I met originally the hiring manager, and he was so pleased with the way the interview went. He said, I'd like you to meet some of my staff, the people that I would be working with. When I was fine with that. When the people came in, they had not seen my resume. They didn't have a resume with me. The hiring manager didn't prepare them. It was just an off-the-cuff thing. So I had actually a little portfolio with me that I could open up, and I asked, would you like me to share a copy of my resume with you? And they spent each, there were two people I met, had a few minutes to now look at it very quickly. I realized that was not as prepared as they could be, but they had that opportunity. It comes across very well, very proactive. Make sure you keep the phone number of your contact with you. You just never know what's going to happen on the way to the interview. If you need to call them, you do. Keep your employment history handy. If you're in person, bring it with you. Otherwise, just keep it handy in a sheet of paper on your phone interview or video interview. The reason why is it becomes very handy for filling out the job application. A lot of times our resume may have just the last 10 or 15 years of experience if we have a longer career, or maybe the companies that are most relevant to the position where the other positions are really either not there or not in any great detail. If you have a sheet of paper that has the companies and the dates that you started there, not really your master resume, but just that, you'll at least be able to fill out the job application, especially if they want to go back fairly far in time. Have your reference list with you. My opinion is if I think the interview went well, I will give out the reference list. If I don't think it went well, I would not, because I certainly don't want people calling my references for the heck of it. But you know, if they ask for the references, that there's an action they want to take, you have it handy. It's a lot better to hand it to them, especially in an in-person interview, than to say, I'll email it to you later. Of course, if you're on a phone interview or a video interview, it's perfectly all right to say, yes, I'll email it as soon as we're done with our video interview. Have a pad and pen handy, or even a tablet computer. What's nice about having a tablet just shows that you're technically comfortable. Now, you may not be able to take notes during the interview, or maybe you will. There's only one or two times that I can remember having a conversation in an interview when I said, excuse me, would you mind if I write that down? I'd like to follow up with that and learn more about it later. And now I've got that note. Or you can use your tablet. So have that handy. Of course, if you're on a video interview, you can keep a pad right along your side. I actually have a pad right on my side right here to make notes whenever I need to. So you can do that. And also keep a copy of the job description. Now, you're not going to walk into the interview and challenge them with anything on the job description. But what I find is whenever I drive to an interview, I usually get there early. And I don't want to knock on the door or go into the front door, you know, a half hour early. I'll sit in the parking lot or maybe the parking lot of the building next to me, and I'll read through some of my papers that I have to keep me in the mindset of the interview, and having a copy of the job description will be handy. Of course, when you're on the video interview, you can keep some of these papers right in front of you. Again, I have a piece of paper in front of me for some notes. You may have it just to refer to. That becomes nice and easy. So with a video or phone interview, you may want to have it handy as well. And also have questions prepared for the interviewer. You may want to write them down. You may want them on a sheet of paper. Again, if you get to the interview a bit early, a half hour ahead of time, read them over, remind yourself of the questions. There'll be a lot going on in an interview. To try and keep them as fresh in your mind as possible will be very handy. Or of course, in a video or phone format, just keep them right in front of you and you can read off the sheet of paper. So it'll be right there for your convenience. Transportation tips. So of course, if you are having an interview that's not a video or phone interview, you're likely going someplace. So if you're driving, if you can, do a dry run the day before. If the place where the interview is going to be is probably within a half-hour drive or so, might not be a bad idea a day or two before. Drive the drive, and typically the same hour of the day. So if you're going to meet them for a 10 o'clock interview and you're going to leave 9 o'clock in the morning, do a dry run, see what typical traffic is like. Just make sure you understand. If you're going to go someplace you don't know the area very well, you don't know the directions, a lot of us have GPS in our cars or on our phones. Have backups, have more than one device or more than one way of getting yourself directions. You may have a GPS like a Garmin or one of those devices, and you may have a Google Maps or a Waze, and that's fine. Two separate devices. If one doesn't start up, the other one will. Have paper directions. In the very worst case, you'll have it written out, the exit you have to take and the turns you have to make. Also, make sure your car is sufficiently maintained that it will get you there. You certainly don't want to break down on the way. Not always a problem for people, but just be aware, if your car's been smoking or the check engine light's been on for weeks, you probably want to take care of it before you leave, just in case. And also, keep your car a little bit clean. And the reason why I say that was a guy I used to work with, his technique was, we were in an office where we had our own parking lot, so kind of a suburban office park kind of office. And when the interview was over, he would say, well, thank you very much for coming. I'll tell you what, I'll walk you out to your car and let's just have a friendly conversation. And the interviewer was completely unaware, but when they got to the car, he was peeking in the windows to see if the candidate kept a messy car. His opinion was a messy car means that candidate won't take care of themselves. So if you have a bunch of garbage or bags or boxes in your car, take them out, leave them in your house or garage, your apartment, drive to the interview, come back, put the boxes back later. Never know who you're going to meet. If you're taking any sort of public transportation, confirm the schedule. For instance, if you were traveling today, let's say to New York City, you would actually be on a different schedule. Today is a holiday schedule, July 3rd. So if you were just thinking, every day of the week the train is at a certain time, it might be at a different time. And the same buses, planes, make sure the schedules hold up. They change sometimes last minute. Check the weather, check the traffic. Weather can slow down your commute, can cause traffic, especially thunderstorms, can have flash floods. Traffic conditions, if there's a traffic accident and such, try and understand if there's anything that's going to cause you to be late or maybe need to take another route. And do allow plenty of time. I always made sure that I got to where I was going at least a half hour early. If I got someplace very early, I usually just sat in a parking lot. I usually like picking a parking lot, not of the building, but of another building next door, just in case one of the employees from that company was going to walk by. I just thought it'd be a little strange. They would see me sitting in my car. If you're there very early, go to a coffee shop or a library. With the pandemic right now, that's a little harder to do. But of course, if you're interviewing at some point in the future when we're very comfortable in public situations. So what I would do is I would usually look on Google Maps and I would look for a local Starbucks or Panera, someplace I can sit for a little bit. And those things that I brought with me, like the job description and my resume, I read them over. I just kept myself refreshed as best as possible, current with that information. Okay, so here is our first intermission, and let's open up chat, and I will go back and start looking for questions. And good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, thank you, thank you. Oh, Alan, congratulations, your son received 2 job offers this week. Give the other one to somebody else. Let's see. So Barbara's asking, sorry if I missed this, will the presentation slides be available? Yes, they will. They are not up right now. They will be this afternoon. This whole slide deck will be on our website, PSG of Mercer County. And I actually have a slide, excuse me, I have a slide in a few minutes that will show you exactly where, a screenshot of the website. The video will be available, if not late this afternoon, by tomorrow morning. From Darcy, I have a Zoom interview. I did not lose internet connection on my cell versus my laptop. I lose connection on my laptop anywhere in my home. Any suggestions? So yes, one suggestion would be sit near your wireless modem or your cable box, whatever has the antenna on it. At the very least, you'll improve the opportunity if you must maintain a Wi-Fi signal. Another thing you can do is the back of the modem typically has a place to plug in Ethernet cable or network cable. I have one here. So this is one that's got these kind of wide ends, a little bit wider than phone connections. Your laptop likely has one of these, depends on the age of the laptop and the model. Your modem may. You can turn your laptop into a hardwired connection just like a desktop. Let's see. Any more questions? So from Ronnie, for Zoom interviews where most are working from home and casually dressed, should the interviewee still wear a suit, given that they would in person? Yes. So that was a comment in an earlier slide. Do dress for the interview. Now, Dress appropriate. Some companies do like business casual. Some prefer that you wear a suit. If you're not sure, it always makes sense to be a little bit more formal. So, wear the suit. Personally, I'm okay with the concept of being casual from the waist down. I've got my formal Hawaiian shirt on, and I'm wearing gym shorts. So that's just the way I'm dressed right now. From William, how many minutes before the interview should you actually knock on the door? I always thought about 5 minutes was fine. So walk into the building or knock on the door within 5 minutes. Anything more than that, you may be interrupting something else that's going on. Ian is asking, getting a haircut is a little problematic right now. Well, that's now a personal call. Haircuts or barbers and salons are now open. So if you're comfortable going to the barber or a salon, do that. If not, you're going to have to just make sure you style your hair so maybe it doesn't flip around a lot. I have not had a haircut for 4 months, but I cut the hair around my face just to so I don't look like the shaggy dog. You may need to use hair gel or hairspray to keep your hair in the place where you want to. So if you're not ready to get a haircut, you may just have to do a little bit more with grooming. Jeriel is asking, what is your opinion on virtual backgrounds on interviews? Some can look professional while others can look distracting. My opinion is some can look professional and others can look distracting, just like you said. I think you need to be a little bit careful with them. So for those of you that don't know, some of the virtual tools, we're using GoToMeeting. I'm not sure that they make it as easy. Zoom does make it easy. What it does is it tries to figure out the program, the Zoom program or GoToMeeting, tries to figure out where you really are and where does your real background end and begin. If it doesn't understand that, then what happens is it flickers and it can be very distracting. You're better off putting a plain background. I just put an old bed sheet over here. Put something plain to hide what you want to hide, than using in a very professional setting the virtual background. And of course, if you have a virtual background that is distracting, even if it's working properly, they're probably looking at the beach or the Golden Gate Bridge and not paying attention to you. You don't want that. Vance is asking, any suggestion for video lighting for a laptop? O-ring does not work. What I do, so I'm sitting at a corner desk. I have 2 lamps here, one on my left and one on my right. And actually the one on my right is a variable. I can make it brighter or darker. So I like to keep lamps, use that. If you can, behind the laptop, put a desk lamp that maybe can throw the light on you. Might work very well. The O-ring may or may not work depending on how bright it is. I know Alex Freund is on the call, or was. He built his own light panel that he put kind of opposite him that does a good job for him. So you may want to take a kind of a piece of wood, and he had this rope light put around. It was not too difficult to make, and then he plugs that in. So you want to make sure it's best in front of you and a little above. So my lamps are both above my eye level and on my left and right. The reason why I don't have it directly in front of me is there's no place for it over there. I'm not able to. Okay, so good. That's our questions for now. Let's move ourselves on to the next part of our program. Some of you may remember there were intermissions in movie theaters, and then the curtains opened up and we watched the rest of the movie. So in your interview, there are different types of questions. We're really only going to talk about them at a high level. We're not going to be able to deep dive. We're not going to have time to do mock interviewing, but I really just want you to be aware of what's out there for you. There are questions that are called behavioral questions, and these are the kinds that are situational. Sometimes they're hypothetical situation. The hiring managers, the people asking you the questions, are trying to anticipate what your future behavior might be in a situation in their office based on the way you handled maybe a similar type of situation before. Tell me about a time that you once confronted an angry coworker. That might be a typical type of behavioral question. And so be aware that these are some types of questions, one type of question that somebody may want to ask you. There are certainly resume related questions. You have a resume, it's the document that they're reading, talks all about you, it's the information that got you the interview. They may want to dive more deeply into the bullet points and the facts that you put in on your resume. Typically, these should be the easiest questions to answer because you wrote your resume from the experience you recall having at work. So these should typically not be very challenging. We'll talk shortly about how to answer questions in general, but these should not be too difficult. There are also performance assessment type questions. These are usually trying to assess your strengths and your weaknesses. They may ask you, how did you achieve a certain goal? What were the steps you took to get the result that you're talking about? And so you should also be prepared and think about, in case somebody asks you, what do you think one of your weaknesses is? Now, we're human beings. We don't think we have weaknesses. But we do. We have situations that we had to learn from or overcome. So think about those. Have answers prepared in your mind for a question like that. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Once you understand your strengths and weaknesses, you can answer a wide variety of questions in this sort of category. There are questions that are called stress test questions. They want to understand how well you're going to handle the day-to-day pressures of the job. You know, maybe if you're in the accounting department, they'll say, well, you know, the month-end close process is a very long process and a lot of pressure. It's got to be done in the 2 days we're allotted. How do you handle a situation like that? So clearly high pressure situations. So they're going to want to understand, are you someone that manages and deals with stress and the pressure of the job well? These are the fun ones. These are dumb questions. And they're not dumb questions, we just think of them as that way, but they're primarily used to test your ability to kind of think on your feet. This is not a question that typically has a right answer or a wrong answer. A lot of the tech companies are famous for these questions. One that I read that was asked at an interview at Google was, how many golf balls will fill a school bus? Well, unless you've done that test already, you don't know how many golf balls there are. And so your answer may be along the lines like, well, I've never done that before, but here's how I would approach it. So, and you talk about, well, I have to understand the make and model of the school bus or how big the inside is and subtract out the volume of the seats and subtract out the volume of everything else. Now I know how much volume and how much does a golf ball take up, all that kind of stuff. And you're really talking about the approach to the question. The answer, by the way, the wrong answer always is, gee, that's a dumb question. Just don't say that, even if you think. And I actually conducted interview sessions with somebody a while ago, and then that was what their question was. Yeah, that's not a promising answer. And then there are certainly illegal questions. There are questions, and this is among the list: race, gender, religion, marital status, age, disabilities, ethnic background, country of origin, sexual orientation, sexual preferences, all that kind of stuff are technically illegal questions. I don't know if Hannon is on the call. I think there are 27 categories, either 17 or 27 categories that are illegal in New Jersey. You are not obligated to answer those questions. The challenge you have is the person who asked the illegal question didn't realize it was an illegal question, the benefit of the doubt. So they're expecting an answer. So you should kind of go over this list and think about which questions you may be comfortable giving at least a generic answer. Now, the other thing is, there may be very legitimate reasons to ask questions like this, but they can't ask this specifically. For instance, an illegal question would be, do your parents live with you at home? That's an illegal question. They should not be asking you about that. But their motivation may be, if your parents live with you at home, you may have a family obligation that would interfere with the working hours. What they can ask you is there any reason that you could not work 8 to 5 every day? Those are our working hours. That's a legal question. You don't have to tell them why you can't. You don't have to say, I've got children at home or I've got elderly parents at home. You could just say, No, I'm not able to work from 8 to 5. And so understand what the motivation. A real world example that happened to me was I was once asked, would I have a problem working on the Jewish high holy days, which is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? On the surface, that sounds like it could be an illegal question. They certainly didn't ask, am I Jewish? And yes, I am Jewish. But I put it in context. I was interviewing for the IT management position at Central Synagogue in Manhattan. And they wanted to make sure that the IT manager would be on site in the office on the high holy days. The reason why is they stream their services to their congregation that cannot attend. And if there's a problem with streaming or other technical problem on a very important day, work day for them, they needed to be taken care of. And so actually I chose, I don't work on the high holy days, so I could not proceed with them. So they weren't asking, hey, are you Jewish? But they wanted to know, can you work on the Jewish holidays? Because our office is open for these reasons. So I was not offended by the question. I understood what the context was. After you were asked the question, you have to give an answer. So we're not going to test specific questions here, but really talk in terms of generalities that apply to all questions. You certainly want to stay relaxed. You want to be pleasant. You want to be professional. You want to come across as if you're having a very professional conversation. Doesn't have to be stiff. It can be comfortable. Also, answer with specifics, not generalities. Mostly, your interviewer, your hiring manager, wants to know very specifically how you address the issue that they asked in their question. So typically phrases like, what I think I might do, or I usually would consider doing, don't really fly very well. You want to answer with specifics. I would address it in such and such a way. I would take this approach, or this is the approach that I have taken before. Also, be concise. Don't ramble. Some of us do have a desire to be very thorough, thinking, well, if I tell them everything, something answered the question. But it actually can be distracting. It could be time consuming. They want to learn as much about you as possible. So you want to make sure that you can answer your questions as concisely as possible. You don't want to be using one-word answers like yes and no. You do want to answer thoroughly, but be concise. Don't ramble. Don't overly explain. Be truthful. Lies can come back at you. So if you're trying to lie your way into a job and you do a good job at it and get the position, well, congratulations, may only be short-lived. Now that you're working and you get the assignment, you may be challenged with something that you can't do, and it may end your opportunity to continue working there. Tell the truth. Lies will come back to you. And always use accomplishment stories. This is very strong. These are called SARS, situation, action, and result. So typically you want to give an answer that has a situation, what was the, or the challenge, or the problem. CAR is challenge, action, result. PAR is problem, action, result. Then the action, here's what I did, and the end result was this improvement or this savings or this completion. So one story as an example, let's see, might be at my company, the management wanted us to close the books, the accounting books, 1 day faster. They said we couldn't keep couldn't have the month-end closing in 4 days. He wanted it done in 3 days so we can improve our corporate performance. And I was one of the people on the team to do that. What we did as a result was, instead of having everyone work 9 to 5, we created 2 shifts and had staggered hours and had the people working longer hours as a group. Some started a little bit earlier, some stayed a little bit later. So we had more working hours in the day that we could put in on the month-end closing, and the result was we shaved it by a day. So the situation was, the challenge was closing the books faster, what steps we took to solve it, and then what our accomplishment was. So always answer with that when you can. It's just very powerful. And expect follow-up. If you gave a nice answer, they may want to learn more. It's a dialogue, it's a conversation. So, oh, tell me very more. Did the people push back on, 3 days a week having to come a little earlier or stay later? How did you overcome that? Maybe they want to know more. So be prepared to have a conversation. You don't always answer a question with a single answer. Throughout the interview, also at the end, you'll have the opportunity to ask the employer questions. And it's not only saved for the end, it can certainly be throughout the conversation. So using my discussion before about shaving a day off the month-end process, after giving the answer, you might even ask them, how do you see a process like that working here? And now you can ask them and get them talking more about the process. But yes, you should always ask questions. You're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. It'd be nice if they offer you the job, so you want to answer well, but do you really want to work there? Is this a place you want to work? So it's got to be a good fit for you. If not, unfortunately, you'll just be very unhappy. So you want to make sure you understand a lot about the people you'll be working with and the organization. Things you want to ask about the organization, some of the challenges that they may be facing, ask about management and management strategies, hopefully things that you've read about when you did your research early on, maybe in press releases and news items. You want to ask them or find out, what are they looking for in a candidate? You can ask them right out, what are you looking for? Because you want to be able to make sure that the answers to their questions match their needs and their expectations. And it's also fair to ask, especially near the end, is there anything else I can answer to help you with your decision? It may prompt them to think about, oh yeah, we need to talk about such and such. So that's also an example of a type of question to ask. One of the resources that provides a lot of examples of this is Alex Freund. He is a career coach and he specializes in interview prep. So you can maybe reach out to him. And we have other career coaches that are at PSG or Mercer County as well. So feel free to reach out to Alan Kirshner or Gary Landy or the others that are in the group. Things not to ask. So what does this company do? You did not do your research. So that's not something you want to ask about. Another thing, when can I start taking vacation? That's the question. It's perfectly legal to ask after you get the offer letter. But in your first or second interview, no, don't ask a question like that. That's really for you to help make your decision. You will or won't take the job after you get the offer. And here's another one. So did I get the job? I actually got that one time. The last time I was actually interviewing with a company that I was working for, I was looking to hire an IT, information technology administrator, interviewed, I don't know, 7 or 8 people. One fellow, we went through the interview. He wasn't asking too many questions, and I asked, do you have any questions for me? Yeah, did I get the job? That's what he asked me, his very first interview, question at the interview. And in my mind, I had 2 answers. I had the answer I wanted to tell him, and I had the answer that I had to tell him. I wanted to tell him, no, he didn't get the job. But I wasn't really allowed to do that. I told him that, we are in the middle of an interview process and HR is managing the process and you'll be hearing from them shortly, kind of the company line. But yeah, that's a bad question to ask. Don't ask that. Okay. What to expect after the interview? You must write a thank you letter. And I know this because it's written in bold red. You must write a thank you letter. Now, you may get a callback for a follow-up interview. That's actually one of the best things that could happen, is that a call or an email, thank you very much, we'd like to go through the next step of the process and interview the senior manager or whatever their kind of comment is going to be. So you may get a comment like that or a call. You may receive an offer of employment, which is obviously the very best news you can get after an interview. Not typically after a first interview. One friend of mine was actually interviewed 9 times before getting an offer. So sometimes the process is long. So you may get an offer of employment. You may get a thanks but no thanks response. Some of us are happy with that. At least there's closure. They don't typically give you a lot of information other than they're moving on with another candidate. And don't get hung up with that. My opinion is, don't get hung up with why someone is not moving along with you. There could be a lot of reasons, and it doesn't really matter because the next hiring manager that you interview with will love you even though the current one didn't. You just never know. You may get no feedback at all. So I'm still waiting to hear from Burlington, the Burlington Coat Factory. I last interviewed with them in late 2013. No feedback at all. Are the odds likely they'll call me? No, but sometimes that happens. Either way, anyway, just don't stop interviewing and networking. Until you walk into the office as an employee for the first day, don't stop interviewing, don't stop networking. And one may even argue, if you have the opportunity to interview even after you started on day one, maybe you consider it. There may be a good opportunity. You may get an offer with that second company, even if you've only been with the first company a couple of weeks. If it's right for you, you can make that decision. Don't feel guilty about leaving a company after you've started for a short period of time, if it's really best for you. But don't stop interviewing, and don't at all stop networking. Let's talk a little bit about thank you letter. And we'll see. So I typically say send it within 24 hours after your interview. If you had an early enough interview in the day, write it that afternoon or evening's perfectly fine. The next day is okay as well. Okay. You can send it via express mail. You can send it as regular mail, certainly, or even as an email attachment. In other words, write a Word document or a Pages document in Apple, make a separate file and attach it. Don't just write it in the content of the email. It'll stand out a little bit when it's an attachment, and they'll open it. What I like about express mail is, these hiring managers, some of them might get a large stack of mail, might get a lot of envelopes. They may not get to it right away, but they always get to an express mail envelope very quickly. Yes, you'll spend $10 or $15 to mail the thing. It's a little bit more money. If it's important for you, go ahead and do that. It should be formal, should be professional letter format. No LOLs or other acronyms other than business acronyms may be okay, but you are writing in a formal process. This is not a text message, anything like that. It's not even an email to friends. So do use a professional format. I like this format. Use 3 paragraphs, not 3 sentences. I've seen a number of thank you letters, especially when I was a hiring manager. Thank you for the interview. I enjoyed our meeting. I hope to hear from you soon. Fine, you made a little effort. I think what's really important is turn those 3 sentences into 3 short paragraphs, 2-3 sentences each, especially the middle one. You want to reference key discussion points that you had in the interview. You want to promote your candidacy. You want to remind them of a point that you talked about and where you can be a highlight or a benefit to the organization. And at the end, just don't write, hope to hear from you soon. Let them know why you're interested in the position and why you want to move forward in the process. Now, you could look for letters online. You could speak with a coach that helps with thank you letters. But I think you want to use a little bit more, a little bit than a little bit less. Also, you do want to write 1 to each main interviewer. Now, the main interviewer, if you had a few interviews, few one-on-one interviews, write to each of them. Each must be a little different, especially that middle paragraph, the reference key discussion points. You want to talk about the discussion points that you had with that person. If you're in a room full of 5 or 6 people in a group interview, you might want to write maybe to the 1, 2, or 3 people that were really the most active in the interview. Because sometimes there are people that are just there to listen in. You don't have to write to them. That's not as important. Certainly ask for the business card on the way out or look for their contact information on LinkedIn. This is your last chance to get the last word of the interview, which is why that 3 paragraphs become important. You get to say, see, this is what we talked about. This is what's important. And so you get to have the last word in the interview. So as we wrap up, in summary, make sure you do your research in interview. Doesn't matter what the format is, in person, on the phone, online, doesn't really matter. Do your research, be very well prepared. If you're having a video or certainly a phone interview as well, make sure you practice good etiquette. Look at the camera, address the people that you're talking to, make sure you have your lighting right, all the things I had on that slide. If you have a phone interview and you're going to be walking around, no loud shoes, no loud background noise. You're going to want to be in a quiet place for both types of formats. Plan what you need to bring with you or have with you. If you're bringing it with you, you may or may not be able to use them actively in the interview, but you could check maybe as just before you start the interview. And also, you can have in the video or phone interview some papers or forms laid out in front of you. You'll have those as well. Keep your routine as normal as possible. Plan your attire and the way you're going to dress and present yourself will be very important. If you're going to be traveling, give yourself plenty of time. Have alternate routes. Be prepared to be there on time. Don't worry if you arrive a little early. You can go sit or park someplace else. Be prepared for different types of questions. You may want to research and practice those on your own. Maybe work with an interview buddy, somebody who can help you and practice with you. And when you answer, make sure that you're pleasant and you give very specific answers. No run-on sentences. Be concise. Becomes very important. And make sure you have some good, solid questions to ask the interviewer as well. Because remember, you're interviewing them, and it also shows that you have interest in the position and the organization. Okay, so we will answer questions in just a moment, so I will check and open that up. But here is where you will find a little bit later today this slide deck. If you see there's a red arrow on the right side of our website, psgofmercercounty.org. The red arrow is next to meeting presentation documents. This is a meeting, granted it's a virtual meeting, and we will be providing the presentation documents. What we will have there is the slide deck, the chat that we're having for the Q&A, and a link to the video. And that video will be, if not later today, by tomorrow morning. Also, right below that red arrow, there's a logo for YouTube. You can click on that logo, also on our website, and that's where you'll find our YouTube channel. That's where we host all of these videos, this week's as well as our prior 11 or 12 weeks worth of videos. They're all there, so you can get them there. So, any more questions as we move forward? And let me get the Q&A open again. So for some chat, let's see. I want to make sure. Let's go back as far. Sorry, just looking for the right question. Okay, I think I got, so sorry if I miss anyone. I think so Shai is asking, every application form asks you to list demographic information such as ethnicity, veteran status, or disability. How is this legal? I think it's, so I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one on TV. I believe that's only for the EOC, Equal Opportunity Commission, or whatever it's called, that is not supposed to be used in the decision-making process, but more for their reporting of the types of people that they are interviewing. By the way, when companies have mass layoffs, they also have to provide similar sort of makeup of staff that are let go. When 1 or 2 people are let go, it's not typical, but a larger group it typically is. So I think it's really for government statistics. They're not supposed to use that as part of the decision-making process. As long as the online application makes that optional, feel free not to answer the question. You have to be comfortable with it. What is the suggested way to reply? This is from Mike. What is the suggested way to reply to an illegal question? It's really very tricky because they did ask and they do want to understand something about you. So you have to decide what you're comfortable answering. Some you may say, oh, that's illegal, but I don't mind answering. Maybe answer the question. If you're uncomfortable, what you could ask. So if someone says, do you have small children at home? Maybe that is an illegal question. You'll say, oh, that's interesting. Why is that important? Or what is it that you're trying to understand? You may want to frame the question, the answer as a question to see what they're trying to understand, because it could just be an interviewer not trying to ask something illegal on purpose, just not knowing something is illegal. Again, the similar question, do you have small children at home, may be different than, is there any reason why you can't be here at 7 o'clock in the morning? My brother-in-law works in a manufacturing company. They start 7 o'clock in the morning, just thinking of him. Well, if he had to get kids on the bus, that might be a problem for him. So it could just be understanding just what it is that they're asking. Tatiana is asking, I was asked when I received my master's degree, but it was the same period as my bachelor's degree so long ago. How to answer, is it legal? I'm not sure that asking when you received your master's degree is an illegal question, especially if you haven't posted the date and it needs to be on the application. Of course, you may be wondering, do they want to know how old you are, if that's what you're trying to wonder? Asking you how old you are is illegal. Seeing that you've presented, you have a master's degree with no date, and asking when that is, that may not be an illegal question. I think that would not be. Again, you may need to speak with an employment law attorney. I know two. If you want, you can talk to me offline and I'll put you in touch. William's asking, should you respond to the thanks but no thanks letter? That's not a bad thing to do. If they're, especially they're not specific. Thank you for applying, we've moved on. You may want to write a letter back to the hiring manager, because it could be they think you're a little too senior. Let's use that as an example. They didn't tell you why. If you are friendly and acknowledge and respond back to them, you may be putting yourself in the back of their mind when they have another position. You may be a good candidate for the company, but not a good candidate for the position. So that's not a bad thing to do. I think it's perfectly okay to do that. Can you handwrite a thank you, scan it, and then email it? Yes, I think that's a little odd. I think if you're going to do a technology version of it, you might want to email a typed written one. One thing I like to do, even in a typewritten, I have a image copy of my signature. So even though I type a letter, I then paste the picture of my image so it looks like I at least signed it. And then I would scan and send that along. But I don't know. I don't think there's anything really wrong with handwriting a thank you letter and scanning it. I guess also be careful if you scan it. If some of the image is lost, might it be hard to read handwriting? Just be a little sensitive to that. Was this recorded? By Doug is asking. Yes. So this is being recorded now. Recording is not yet over, and it will be available later today or tomorrow morning. From Ronnie, for a behavioral question, tell me about a time when. Is the reply meant to be relayed super quickly? How long should you take to tell the story? How long to take the story? Again, you need to be concise. You need to be quick. I think you want to answer a question within a minute. There's no problem with even making it a little shorter. You don't want to make this a biography. It does a couple of things. You may bore somebody if you take too long. They just want to hear the facts. You may be starting to start giving up more information than you really want to. That may be a distraction. So for behavioral or any question, tell me about a time when, you want to try and be as concise as possible. Pat's asking, should you ask the interviewer how long they have been at the company? If a long time, what do they like? I'm not sure. If a long time, what do I'm not really sure what that second part. Yeah, I don't think there's a problem asking the person how long they've been at the company, but the thing is, you should know that, especially if they're on LinkedIn. Now, if it's a means to an end, if you want to have a bit of a conversation about longevity of employment, then that's perfectly fine. So make sure you understand any question that you ask, what the goal of your answer is going to be. But I don't think it's a question that you need to avoid. Let's see. So again, I'm asking you, please put the word question in front. It's hard to keep up with all of these. Some of you have not. Patty, is it still necessary to carry your documents, diplomas, and recommendation letters to the interview? I have not seen anyone ask for that in recent times. It's your call. You may want to have that in case somebody asks. You may want to have samples of your work with you. Don't force it upon them, and don't say, hey, I've got this stuff you should look at. But if anyone ever asks, can you provide me a recommendation? it might be impressive to say, you know, I've got recommendation letters with me. Would you like a copy? That might be showing a little bit of being proactive. So having those sorts of things may not be a bad idea at all. Diplomas, probably not. That's usually done as part of a reference check later on, but recommendation or samples of work may be appropriate. Joey is asking, unlike the person who asked if he got the job, can you recall something very positive in a candidate that did that was remarkable? Sorry, please mute yourself. Okay, Marguerite, please mute yourself. Margaret. Okay. I'm just going to take a moment and quickly see if I can mute that phone. There we go. Good. And go back to the question. So, Joey, can you recall something very positive a candidate did that was remarkable? The last time I interviewed somebody was in 2013. So, no, I don't recall anything remarkable. What I liked when I was interviewing candidates, I would give them real-world scenarios in my office. Maybe like when I was managing the infrastructure, I might ask, what are some of the challenges that you faced when you've tried to reconfigure a router, something like that. Thinking about a time that my staff may have had challenges reconfiguring a router. So I wanted to hear how they attacked a real world problem in their answer. Nothing stands out as exceptionally remarkable. This one's kind of funny. Actually, Joe, you made me think. I did an interview, this was probably around 2010 or so. Myself and another person in my organization, the database administrator, were interviewing a programmer. Before I was an infrastructure manager, I was a programming manager. We interviewed a programmer. There were a number of programmers, and one was a gentleman, showed up on time. By itself, nothing remarkable. The process of the interview was I interviewed him by myself, and then I introduced him to the other person, the database administrator, and I stepped out of the room. And then he had his, 45 minutes or so. And then I came back to escort him to the elevator. At the end of the interview, I walked over to the other gentleman's desk, the database administrator, and began to ask, what do you think of this candidate we just saw? The database administrator sat by a window. The window overlooked the parking lot, and we happened to see the gentleman leaving and going to his car. It was a day that was like 95 degrees, 95% humidity, just one of those hazy, hot, humid days. And he opened his car door and he began to undress. Now, it's one thing to take your jacket and tie off. This guy stripped down to his underwear and then put on shorts and a t-shirt right in the parking lot. I thought that was odd. I get it. It's hot. Maybe you don't have air conditioning in the car. Drive to the next parking lot and do that. It just so happens he did it in front of us. And we both thought that was odd. We didn't hire the guy. So that was either remarkable or unremarkable. Have you ever heard of the Book of Lists? Okay, yes. And that's the end of the questions. So good. So thank you, everybody. So let's get ourselves back. Here's the contact information for PSG of Mercer County. I'll just leave this up here for another moment or two and also let you know of what we have coming up. We are meeting virtually, continually meeting virtually each week. We've got a really cool program next week, a little bit of a coup on our part. Woman is coming, her name is Amy Warner. Amy Warner, she is the Director of Talent Management at a company called ICIMS. If you have not heard of ICIMS, you've used it without even knowing it. They are one of the largest software companies that develop the applicant tracking system. So this is the Director of Talent Management at one of the largest software companies that makes the ATS. And she's going to talk about effectively use an applicant tracking system for job search. So there are a lot of tips and tricks for using an applicant tracking system effectively, and we're going to hear it right from one of the software development companies and from someone who manages talent acquisition, so someone who's got a lot of experience in the hiring process. So that'll be next week, next Friday, July 10th, right here. We'll be sending out the email shortly. If you're not on our email list, the connection information will be on our website's event calendar. The following week, July 17th, Paul Sakala will be here. Paul's a good friend, comes back to visit us every once in a while. His program is called Work Search Buddies, Finding Success with a Little Help from a Friend. It's a terrific idea to find a friend that you can work with and either mock interview or ask for advice or a little bit of guidance. Paul's going to be talking a lot about that. Other things that are coming up, George Pace has been keeping his weekly Facebook seminars going, Sunday mornings, every Sunday morning live on Facebook. You can check that out on facebook.com/keeppace, facebook.com/keeppace. That's all one word, KEEPPACE, 2 P's. Other groups that are meeting virtually in the coming weeks, the Breakfast Club of New Jersey will be meeting every second Saturday of the month. So that's July 11th. So it's coming up next Saturday, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's going to be a virtual meeting, and they're going to have Ashley Owens is going to be presenting. She is just wonderful as a networking strategist, how to not suck at networking. I've seen this presentation. She actually came and gave it at PSG of Mercer in January. It is just fun. It's wonderful. It's informative. You may want to listen to that. Breakfast Club of New Jersey. Go to their website, thebreakfastclubnj.com, thebreakfastclubnj.com, to get the link information for that program. Our cousin organization, PSG of Central New Jersey, they are meeting on Monday at 10:30 in the morning. psgcnj.biz, psgcnj.biz, you can get their virtual contact information. Dale Favia is going to be there. So talk about cousins. She's the president of PSG of Morris County, another PSG that's still very active. She'll be talking about storytelling that drives results. So it's another terrific program. There's also the New Jersey Job Seekers, the oldest continuously running job seeker support group in New Jersey. They meet every Tuesday evening at 7:30. As soon as I get the connection info, which probably will be later today, I will post that in our PSG of Mercer County LinkedIn group. And so that'll be every Tuesday there virtually. Tuesday will be at 7:30 in the evening. So that's what we have coming up over the next couple of weeks. So hope you're available and you'll be able to come visit us next week here, July 10th, and you'll meet Amy Warner, Director of Talent Acquisition for ICIMS, and she'll be talking about applicant tracking system. But until then, I do hope that you have a very warm and wonderful July 4th Independence Day weekend. Stay safe, and hope to see you all virtually very soon as early next week. So bye, everybody.